Anarcho-Capitalism. This is one of those niche ideologies that isn't really taken seriously by a lot of people on the left. It tends to get dismissed. I think they got some good ideas, some smart ideas. And they obviously like to emphasize the benefits of capitalism. That's their whole thing, right? I often criticize capitalism on this channel, but one thing that I'll definitely give kudos to capitalism for is specialization, right? I like some elements of specialization in the social division of labor. I do like that you can have one person dedicate themselves to one thing that they're very good at, and somebody else dedicate themselves to something else that they're very good at, and they can exchange, and through that process of exchange, they can gain each other's power, sort of, right? I like that. And one thing that I would argue a lot of the emphasis on the left when it comes to disability is missing is the role of specialization. So, in disability justice circles, it's often said that everyone is disabled. I think this is correct. I think that understanding disability as a binary isn't a great way of understanding things. You're not either disabled or you're not. It's probably a gradient where most people are like disabled-ish or disabled adjacent. Everyone has some things that they are able to do and some things that they're not so able to do, right? And the things you're not so able to do, you could say you're disabled in that department, right? I think that's a good way of describing it, actually. I have some things that I'm not so good at in life. Taxes, for example, right? Not great at taxes. And I'm not great at consistently brushing my teeth. That's embarrassing. I'm a grown adult. I should be better at consistently brushing my teeth, but I don't have that habit down yet. It's very hard for me to form good habits. It's very easy for me to form bad habits. That's why I stay away from all the drugs and the alcohol and the addictive stuff, right? That's why I'm straight edge. That's why that's a significant portion of my personality. So I stay away from all that stuff because I form bad habits easily. And I struggle to form good habits. So it would be really nice if there could be someone that I could pay through my own hard work at the things that I'm good at to take care of the stuff that I'm not so good at for me, right? Like if we could just acknowledge I'm good at some things and not good at other things, and then accept that about me as an individual for a little bit. Maybe I could try to improve some of those things. Maybe I could try to change some of those things about myself. I surely am already trying to change a whole lot about myself for the better on the daily basis, on the regular. Always trying to change for the better. That's normal process of life, right? But if we could accept some limitations a little bit and allow me to just pay a guy to help me out, right? I think that would be very helpful. And I think anarcho-capitalism has a lot to say about this, right? Because they would point out the value of creating new markets. The value of creating markets for services people hadn't previously imagined. And in an era of abundance and abundant wealth, that might be a good solution for a lot of people to chop off little pieces of their own personal responsibilities and have those things be taken care of by others. So the irony here, when it comes to this framework of disability justice through anarcho-capitalism, right? The irony is that the government is usually what we rely on as the thing to protect disabled people. That's one of the basic functions of a state in the eyes of social liberals going back to the 1700s, is that we need it to care for the sick, the disabled, the unable to work, more or less, right? And as time went on, one of the greatest reductions of poverty in human history was the invention of Medicare and of Social Security, because those programs were solving a massive problem of elder poverty, because people had started to live longer, and they were unable to work, and they weren't being taken care of, and so they ended up And so they were poor, and they would jump trains and so on, and this is where a lot of the hobos came from. The archetype of a hobo of like the Great Depression, that was this massive crowd of homeless old people who were largely disabled by their age, largely unable to work, and as a result, were just living in poverty. And the creation of these social programs emerged in direct response to that. So I by no means personally agree with the anarcho-capitalist perspective of let's just get rid of all of these social programs. But there is a thing to be said for some of these anarcho-capitalist critiques. I'll give you a real-life story. I was working at a workplace, and this workplace had a number of older people and a number of disabled people working there, who were working there mostly because most of the job related to driving around. You could drive around all day for the most part and be okay. But you had to load heavy car parts in and out of your vehicles. So for brief periods of the day, there was a significant physical component to this job. And in order to load up your van, you had to take the car parts out of the building and out to your van, right? But your van was only accessible via several staircases that they had. So you had to take these car parts and walk downstairs in order to get to your van. It was a small flight of stairs. But for some of these older people, they were complaining an awful lot because they didn't feel safe. They didn't feel like this was a good idea. They felt like it was only a matter of time before some of this stuff was going to fall on them. And for the really heavy stuff, the solution we had was to put it on a cart and then just kind of inch the cart down the steps, just kind of ka-chug, 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 ka-chug. And like me, the young guy, I did that all the time. I was fine. I could ka-chug, ka-chug, ka-chug heavy car parts down these steps. But it wasn't really safe for the older people and for the disabled people at this workplace, right? And I wasn't even involved in this dispute, but they were complaining to the managers off to the side. And what I kept overhearing, was the managers couldn't put in a ramp, even though they were being asked. They're like, can't you just get rid of those stairs and put in a ramp, right? And they couldn't put in a ramp, because if they were to put in a ramp in that spot, the ramp would be too small and wouldn't be an ADA compliant ramp. And so from their perspective, not putting in an ADA compliant ramp would be a risk in terms of their regulations, right? So they would rather have no ramp at all. And so disability regulations actually forced this workplace, if the managers weren't lying, maybe they were lying, forced this workplace into a situation where they had no choice but to not offer a ramp. So this is what happens a lot of time with these blanket demands from the state, from the top down, is they lack the knowledge of what's going on the ground floor. And because they lack the knowledge of what's going on the ground floor, simple, intuitive solutions to problems that could be arisen at and solved very quickly and very easily by a studious, hardworking individual on that ground floor cannot be solved, because these problems have been accounted for and solved for on a top-down level before I, as the employee of this company, have even arrived. The government's figured it out. The manager of this massive corporation has figured out what they want to do. And the ability for me to actually just go out and solve this problem, it's not even in my control at this point. And this lack of ability to get things done, this urge, that drives a lot of the different movements we are seeing right now in America. A lot of these different political movements are driven by that same resentment in different ways. If you watch the TV show Daredevil, Born Again, that's a great show, and it had a scene where Fisk, who's supposed to be this populist, man of the people type character, he ends up filling a pothole. He sees it, he's in the middle of traffic, and he sees like 8 guys standing around a hole doing nothing, wearing their yellow vests, right, as is the cliche, and he says, you know what, fuck it, I'll fill it myself. And he goes and he grabs a shovel from them, and he starts putting asphalt into the hole. Takes 2 seconds, easy as hell, easiest task you could do. I know some anarchists who go and they just do it. They just go and they just fill potholes without the city's permission. They do it in masks so they don't get caught. They do it in the dead of night or whatever. And they go and they fill pothole and they help the community. And the community thanks them for it, right? It's this sort of spontaneous, emergent action that anarchists on the left and the right are both orienting towards. This spontaneous, emergent, problem-solving kind of a force is what libertarian left and the libertarian right want to tap into against the will of the state and of massive corporations and of these big, slow-moving, gigantic institutions that lack the ability to just make a quick judgment on the ground floor when there's a problem. And this same impulse towards let's just fix it now, like just get out of my way, I'll do it, it takes 2 seconds, just stop preventing me from fixing it, right? This same impulse is also the impulse behind monarchism and calls for dictatorship. Because a lot of the calls for monarchy and dictatorship and authoritarianism that are coming out of sort of the authoritarian right, what a lot of them are basically saying is, hey, democracy is slow. We all argue with one another. The taxes go up by 1%. They go down by 2%. Everybody cares about winning victories for their party. All of these politicians are just trying to bring pork home. They're just trying to do all these little things that are in their own self-interest, and they move things around. They just talk and talk and talk in circles. And I see this in a workplace. You see this in your day-to-day life. People who are willing to just talk in circles for days about a problem. I don't have the attention span for it. I got too much ADHD to sit here and talk in circles about a problem for years. I would rather just imperfectly solve that problem now than talk for days and then come up with the perfect solution and then fail to execute because it was too bureaucratic, which is what usually happens, right? I would much rather come up with an imperfect solution immediately and then just pragmatically act. And that same impulse is urging a lot of young people on the right to move towards authoritarianism and dictatorship. Because a strong executive is somebody who can just go, well, let's just get it done. I'll just do it. I say unilaterally, I've decided through executive order that this is happening. Everyone else shut up. And it works to an extent. I actually do think it works to an extent. It has some obvious downsides. I'm not gonna say authoritarianism doesn't have some obvious downsides, but you're already aware of all of the downsides, the violations of civil liberties, the excessive policing, mass deportation, etc. You're aware of the downsides, if you consider those things downsides. I'm trying to tell you where this impulse comes from. What's the upside, right? This same impulse is also behind the abundance movement on the left right now with people like Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. They're basically saying, hey, you're right, Trump. We should be able to do some of this stuff faster. It's just that the stuff that we need to streamline the processes on is infrastructure development. The stuff that we need to streamline is building things constructively. What we probably don't need to streamline is like deporting migrants or police, or just policing inner city neighborhoods. We probably don't need to get rid of as many regulations that are preventing excesses of the state violating people's rights and liberties. What we need is to streamline the bureaucratic processes that are getting in the way of our government building constructive public works that we can all benefit from. So, ANCAPs, anarcho-communists, fascists, and whatever Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein, whatever you would call them, they're kind of authoritarian left. They're not communists, though. Whatever those four little quadrants are all in agreement on this. And if we moved in a direction of generally moving away from these top-down blanket regulations, I think it would likely be the case that emergent solutions to the problems of disabled people that come from their immediate community, from people around them learning to assist them and to specialize and to fill that metaphorical pothole in your life, a guy whose job it is to yell at me when I don't brush my teeth, would emerge out of the blue, I think. I think if we just got some of this stuff out of the way, then we as people would no longer be looking at one another on a ride to work in the morning as just this alienated cog. And if somebody in our lives is having a problem, we would have the space and the liberty in our own life to take action and fix it. And I think that would mean a lot higher quality of life for a lot of disabled people.